Well, this certainly wouldn't fly today. The mid-2000s were a blatantly bizarre time in culture compared to what we have now. I'd say in the past 10 to 15 years, society as a whole has moved away from edgier offensive content, and in some ways, don't tell them I said this, society's gotten a little soft. This certainly wasn't the case in the early to mid-2000s, where rebellion and counterculture is exactly what the Doctor had ordered. A few years of Eminem dominating the music scene. South Park in its early glory days. And there were only 2 world championships. So needless to say, a lot of content in the WWE, whilst not as blatantly crazy as the Attitude Era of the 90s had been, was still on the edgier side in the 2000s. Enter Eugene. As a kid, like many of you, I didn't realize that Eugene's gimmick was supposed to be a form of ableist mockery. I was fairly innocent and sheltered, and I honestly just thought Eugene was a well-meaning but slightly foolish individual, and to be fair, it's not like I was far from the truth. And I honestly didn't think there was anything particularly egregious about Eugene when I was a kid. How about we look back on it with a grown-up lens? Oh dear. Yeah, no, that's... Eugene as a character was Eric Bischoff's barely literate nephew who had spent a lot of time nervously chewing on his thumb whilst pulling facial expressions that I can only describe as definitely not on the cards in the 2020s. There's issues of representation that are probably worth a debate here, as allegedly the Eugene character was the idea of Rip Rogers, an OVW trainer who was inspired by his autistic son. Do I think it's a little edgy to have the idea of sending an autistic 240-pound man into a wrestling ring to cause chaos? Yes, I do. Eugene was portrayed by Nicholas Dinsmore, who was on OVW Graduate. When debuting on WWE television, Eugene was referred to as special, without any real detail on what disability Eugene was supposed to have allegedly had. That in itself is rather problematic. He would be under the care of William Regal, and would have feuds with Jonathan Coachman and Eric Bischoff during his time on Monday Night Raw. I also rather fondly remember him from SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, a video game which I need no excuse to bring up. In the game, he was manipulated by Trish Stratus into costing himself and Regal the tag titles. Wrestling video games had some amazing storylines back then, damn. If you thought the problematic representation at the start of his career was bad, hey, look at this photo of him wrestling in 2007. Isn't that surely something? Thankfully, Eugene never really did much in the WWE. I'm not going to waste much more time talking about it. I don't actually like this gimmick at all. Not because it's offensive, but because it's not funny. Instead, I'm going to focus on how the people who were involved with the gimmick feel about it, starting with Eric Bischoff, who on his 83 Weeks podcast admitted that he wasn't as concerned about the Eugene gimmick as he perhaps should have been. On the podcast, both Conrad Thompson and Eric Bischoff agree that Dinsmore did a good job portraying the character, but that the character itself was distasteful. With Eric Bischoff expressing concern about how much of an effect WWE television has on people. With a hint of remorse, he explained that he thinks of the parents of a child with special needs who might absolutely love wrestling and feel like they were being made fun of. What of Dinsmore himself? Well, he explains that he's had mostly positive feedback on the Eugene character, saying that fans who have approached him suggest that Eugene was more of an inspirational character than a blatant mockery. Nick Dinsmore explains how he'd been stuck in developmental for years at this point and was just waiting for his big opportunity. From his perspective, he was given an opportunity and ran with it. He didn't have time to reflect on the ins and outs and nuances of the portrayal. Nick also expresses feeling like he didn't have time to truly flesh out the character, the idea that Eugene was supposed to actually be somewhat of a secret genius, quick with trivia knowledge. We never got to see that on TV, as the Eugene character was both sporadic and short-lived. Jim Cornette also wasn't best pleased with the Eugene gimmick, praising Nick Dinsmore as a talent. Cornette would say that he would have loved to have Nick at Ring of Honor, but couldn't because of the, quote, stink of Eugene. Dinsmore himself would go on to form his own promotion called Midwest All Pro Wrestling and see some relative success on a local level. But I very much doubt we'll ever see Dinsmore featured on WWE again, let alone AEW or TNA. I think his time in the mainstream of wrestling is done, but I wish him well in his future endeavors. What do you guys think anyway? Was Eugene a good idea poorly executed? A bad idea executed well? And would it fly today? Thanks for watching another Sarcastic Wrestling Mark video, and I'll see you next time.